We go ahead and get started this morning. I want to welcome everyone. My name is Tracy O'Brien and I work at Tomlinson. And today I am very happy to welcome you to Experience, Progress, and Leadership. And for anybody who attended our show last year, it was our first time speaking at this event, and we talked more about foundational items, getting a seat at the table, the challenges, the barriers. This year, we want to take it up a level. And we want to start talking more about how do women break into leadership and executive leadership. Before we get started, I'd like to invite up Cassandra Crawford from C&M Electric, who will be introducing our panelists.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Cassandra Crawford, Operations Manager at C&M Electric, and we're proud to sponsor and introduce this session, Experience, Progress, and Leadership, Women Shaping Construction's Future. Today's panel brings together a group of accomplished professionals who are not only shaping projects, but also helping shape the direction of our industry. Please join me in welcoming Emily Thomas from Ellis Dawn, Katie Bautista from Architecture 49, and Kelly Maisonneuve-Renault from Plan Group. We're also pleased to have additional speakers joining us virtually. Thank you all for being here. Let's begin.
When Tracy called to do this interview about women in construction, I thought, yeah, that's great. I've been an architect for a long time now, and maybe I'd have something to offer. And then I started thinking about each one of those questions, and I really had to dig deep. We're people. Everybody's a person, and everybody is striving for the same thing, trying to get the best work done for the industry.
So one theme that often comes up when we talk about career growth is the importance of support, whether that be mentorship, advocacy, or simply making space for others to succeed. For this question, we asked our panelists to think about how those of us working in the industry today can be more intentional about supporting the next generation entering construction.
So part of this, I think, is intentionality starts with visibility and representation. We have to share our story. We're responsible for that, to include the challenges, the pivots, and the lessons that we've learned. Young women can only aspire to what they can actually see. We need to offer guidance, not hand-holding, not markups. We need to teach and mentor of why things are the way they are in order that these young professionals are able to move forward with the understanding of things that they can apply to their next tasks. We also have to hold women accountable. We've got to be honest about their performance. Is it terrific? Has it exceeded expectations? Or does it need to be dealt with better next time? Accountability provides confidence, competence, and credibility in a male-dominated world. Introduce young women early. Take them to where there's clients. Take them to the site. Take them to city presentations and supervision roles. Let them see what they're actually getting themselves into, and so that they can learn by osmosis before they're actually out there by themselves. Many of us who have been around for quite a while talk about the scary years, when we really weren't given a lot of mentorship. We were given markups, but for the most part, we were isolated and underestimated. But boy, did we work late hours, long hours, and lots of weekends. We need to be the mentor that we wish we had had back in those days. It can be the simple interactions. Go for the regular check-ins. Take your younger staff out to industry events. Share contacts in order that they can understand what their trajectory can be early on with someone, not on their own. Younger women bring digital fluency. They're fresh thinking. They have new expectations for a work culture. More experienced women bring wisdom, strategic judgment, and diplomacy. Between the two, we are an absolute force to be reckoned with. Encourage the young women to build relationships across the trades, across the consultants, and with clients. A wide network builds confidence, visibility, and long-term opportunities. Help make introductions. These small acts have a huge impact. Demonstrate competence, integrity, and collaboration wherever possible. Young women absorb as much from seeing as doing. Model what leadership looks like. Not perfection, but consistency.
To sum this up in one word, mentoring. For women to see themselves in construction or engineering, where I'm coming from, they really need to see themselves in these roles through mentors and other senior people operating in those fields. So having a female mentor available to help with career guidance, give them an idea of what the future may hold, is just a really important part of career development for anybody in these fields. And even just to express to young people that these are options for them to consider. When I was entering the industry about 25 years ago, that was very difficult. There weren't other people around that looked like me, that were doing the things that I wanted to do, and it was really difficult for me to then see myself in those future roles. I count myself fortunate. I had really strong male mentors, and they took the time to speak to me about what I was feeling around being a woman in a male-dominated industry. And we would talk about how that was going to be challenging for me and what they would do to help me and how we could really work together on those things. I think having women do this is even more powerful. So today, I really feel like mentorship is the single most important thing that I do on a day-to-day basis. The other piece of mentorship that takes this to another level is providing useful feedback to people. As I was growing in my career, the people who were always giving me feedback were men in the industry, and while this was valuable, there is really something to say about how people give and receive feedback along gendered lines. There are fundamental differences in how we take in and give out information based on the different traits between men and women. So it's highly important for people to understand how this information is given and received and what those gender differences are so that people can get the most out of the feedback and then also know what to do with it. The last item is providing opportunities. When you look at research and trends out in industry, there can be differences in how men and women are given opportunities as compared to one another. It holds that there are fewer opportunities for stretch assignments given to women. So opening up those doors, providing those opportunities for challenging assignments can really only lead to more good things if women are given those opportunities as potential pathways.
So how can women be more intentional about supporting the next generation in construction? Well, I think mentoring is a large part of that. Coming into construction, I always looked for mentors, but I always looked for a female mentor as well. And so when you can't find that person, it's hard to see yourself moving forward in the industry. So the women who are experienced, looking for those younger women coming in and taking the time to get to know them, to take them under your wing and teach them a bit about what's going on and help them as they move along their career. But truly, I think that the question here is actually backwards. I think that because women are the minority, we're really putting a lot on women to grow women in the industry. And really the question should be, what do the men need to do to bring women into the industry? Men are in the majority, and they're going to be the ones who are able to impact this on a larger scale. So turning this around, the question really should be to the men, what can you do and what are you doing today to help improve the conditions, to mentor a young woman along in her career, and help build that demographic in our industry?
So now, I'd like to turn that question back over to the panelists. And Haiti, if you'd like to kick us off.
Thank you so much. So I have to echo what already has been said. I think the most powerful ways women can support the next generation of women in construction is by being intentional about mentorship and visibility. I've learned that so much of this industry is navigated through experience and informal knowledge. Mentorship doesn't always mean a formal program. It could be taking the time to explain how things work, advocating for someone when opportunities come up, or simply letting them know that they're not alone in figuring it out. As a woman, and especially a visible minority, having someone do that early on can make a huge difference. On the topic of visibility, that's equally as important. When younger women see someone who look like them leading meetings, running projects, or showing up confidently on site, it changes what they believe is possible. Representation tells them, women, you belong here. Not as an exception, but as part of the future of the industry. If we want the construction industry to change, we don't have to wait for the next generation. We have to show them in real time that there's already space for them here. I'll pass it on.
Okay, so I'm going to take this in a bit of a different direction and start with a pretty blunt and bold statement. It's not going to seem like it relates to the question, I promise it does. So I have a generalized anxiety disorder and ADHD, and you're probably wondering why the hell I would admit that in front of a group of industry professionals, but that's kind of the point. Mental illness is so common, so much more common than people realize, but we don't talk about it. It's so common that 18% of women and girls over the age of 12 in Canada have been diagnosed with a mood or anxiety disorder. 18%. That's 1 in 5. It is that common and prevalent in our country amongst women, and yet mental health is yet to be mentioned. This doesn't surprise me, and I wouldn't expect it to surprise any of you, because for as long as time, women especially have been encouraged to keep their struggles and their emotions to themselves. Mental illness is something society wants you to hide, because anything that makes you different is automatically seen as a negative. You're made to feel like if you're struggling that you're crazy or stupid or incapable, and none of that is true. I will never let someone convince me that having anxiety or ADHD makes me less of a project manager. I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years being very intentional about teaching myself that just because my mind works a little bit differently than other people's, that doesn't mean it's bad. It might not always be positive, but that doesn't mean it's always entirely negative. My ADHD brain is actually really good at pattern recognition. And if you know, you know. This allows me to suss out people's patterns in their behaviors and actions. And I work with people every day, so that can kind of feel like a superpower. My anxious brain, on the other hand, loves to think about everything that could possibly go wrong ever. And that's not always fun, but I can not only plan for things to go right, I can also plan to prevent things from going wrong, and that can be really helpful in project management. My struggles with mental health and anxiety and ADHD are not conversations that I shy away from, because talking about it is the easiest way to reduce the stigma. Because when we talk about it and we don't hide it, we make sure that people don't feel alone. When we're quiet and we pretend it doesn't exist, people feel isolated and alone, and they're more reluctant to seek help. In construction, we are expected to be tough and strong at all times, and showing anything less than that is often seen as a weakness. If we want to support the next generation, we need to change that. We need to reduce the stigma. We need to educate people about the differences between the everyday stresses that come with the job and the overwhelming stresses that can be detrimental to someone's mental or physical well-being. We have the power to flip the script, from treating mental illness like it's uncommon or a taboo topic that just shouldn't be brought up, to helping people recognize just how commonly those around us struggle with anxiety or ADHD, depression, etc. We, as a younger generation, are more open about conversations with mental illness. It's not a shot towards the older generation, it's just a fact of life that we have grown up in an environment that's a little more open. And we can use that to our advantage. We can create an environment where not only do the people after us feel more comfortable opening up about their struggles and being honest about what's going on in their own mind, but we can also change the environment for ourselves and for the people that came before us. And I think all of the above are equally important.
So I believe that it shouldn't only fall on women, but it should be every single person in this industry. Change happens when we're all intentional about making it. So when I started, by trade, I'm a plumber pipe fitter. I started in 2011. We were 3 to 4 women in my union. That's counting me. There was roughly 1,450 members, sorry. Today, 15 years later, I just got the numbers, we're 1,800 members, or maybe 20 women. So it is an increase, but it's not enough, but it's an increase, so we'll take it. I'm lucky, my mentorship, honestly, was great. I had a lot of men that supported me. They taught me, they guided me, they showed me that inclusion is about who's showing up and who's willing to help you open that door. 6 years ago, I was fortunate for my local union. I got the opportunity to start teaching our apprentices. So we have this program that all apprentices have to take 2 courses a year. So it might not seem like much, but to me and for my union, how they brought it up to me was that the course I taught was Introduction to Plumbing. It was a mandatory course that all the apprentices had to take. I am one of the first mentors that these apprentices were going to see. So they get to see a woman there, knowing her trade, teaching them. We're showing them that we're here to stay, and we're here to grow. We're even here to teach. Sorry, lost where I was. So yeah, visibility matters. There's one thing I want to leave with you guys, is that we don't only need more women in construction. We need an industry that when a woman steps onto the job site, it's not something that we notice, it's something that we expect. Because when that's going to become the norm, that's when we actually make a change.
So in every career, there's often a shift from being known from doing the work well to being trusted to lead others and take on greater responsibility. That transition isn't always obvious, and it often comes from experience, visibility, and the opportunity to lead. For this question, we asked our panelists to reflect on what helped them from moving from being seen as strong performers to being recognized as leaders within their organizations and on project teams.
I think the transition to leadership begins when you stop asking about how do I execute well to how do I elevate the work and the people around me. Growth rarely happens in a safe and familiar place. Very early on, I remember being handed a sketch for a not-for-profit project, 13 stories, and I looked at it and I thought, well, wouldn't it be better if we flipped it around, rotated it? And so I did that. I'd barely been out of school, but I did that. And I made the argument of cost, constructability, the amount of daylight, all those good things. And the boss accepted it, and that's how the project went through. So don't just accept things that are handed to you. Like, think for yourself, but be ready to back it up. Leaders are recognized not for avoiding risk, but for managing them and moving through them. Forever, I have pondered things, I have asked questions, and I find that this business is pretty spectacular for that. Recently, finished a project that has a septic system that has 90,000 liters of effluent per day. It was like reading the Scientific Americana all over again of the facts. What became really obvious in it were the experts from the septic group. They talked like it was a black box. Asking those questions allowed the electricians, the mechanical contractors to actually understand holistically how the system worked and to make sure that all of the work on site was put in place. Don't be afraid to ask those questions when you're not sure what you're talking about, because odds are the other people around the room, they don't know either. Information alone doesn't create power. It's how you manage that information. What do you do with it? Leadership isn't always glamorous. Some days I honestly feel like a janitor, cleaning up problems that I didn't create so that the team can keep moving forward. Having a high perseverance for the unexpected, you gotta have that. Every day is a different story. Staying steady when others shake their head builds trust and positions you as a stabilizing force. I was always considered shy when I was young, probably still am, certainly quiet. My only way of dealing with things as a young professional was to go to meetings. I would practically have a nervous breakdown. So to get around that, I decided I'd go teach at Algonquin College. I had to talk in front of a group every Thursday night. And from that, it's been terrific moving forward for the rest of my career. I'm still a quiet person, but I've been told that when I speak, my words carry a huge weight. As a leader, you've got to be willing to step in, support a team, and absorb the pressures when they need it. Leadership requires resilience. Being ready to take a hit for the team, that's our role as a leader. So when you have been mentoring a young professional and they come up with something that's fantastic, you don't take credit for it. You take pride in it because that person has learned, and what you're actually doing is creating your legacy for years to come. You have to be consistent, you have to be strategic, and you have to be supportive.
When I look back on my journey of moving from being a working engineer to being somebody that was in management and then shortly thereafter part of senior leadership, it really feels like a continuum for me. I don't see a single defining moment that I would point to, but more of a series of experience that together led me to finding my feet and becoming someone that could be a future leader. Early in my career, I think it was taking on more challenging assignments, being responsible for larger project portfolios where I had to engage with many more staff and manage a lot of moving parts. That was something of a precursor to becoming someone involved in management. Also, the managers that I had over that period of time were individuals that were really open with me. And so they would share some responsibilities with me. They would be open with sharing information and talking about corporate objectives. And then we would also talk about strategies for projects and bigger undertakings where they weren't just sharing their ideas with me, but they were also seeking my input. Really, it came down to having an environment that encouraged me to participate in bigger picture thinking. And that was really key to helping me move into a leadership stream. Becoming a manager before being elected to the board of directors was really helpful in exposing me to a much broader form of dialogue in talking about corporate responsibilities and understanding how to participate at that level. It gave me better context about what a board role involved. The opportunity to be a manager also let me build trust with a broader group of senior leaders. I was able to demonstrate my interest, and they were able to delegate some responsibilities to me, kind of test how I would perform, and trusting that I can take things on. It was really a matter of other senior leaders cultivating an environment that allowed me to grow into these positions.
Sorry about the volume on that one, guys. We lost our IT guy.
You know, when we think about how we go through, how we transition and go up the ladder to become leaders in the company, I didn't have a traditional methodology. I was groomed to be a leader. I wasn't allowed to get my truck license in case I would like driving a truck. I was always to figure out how to administratively take care of the company and manage people and equipment. So that's what I did. I was working on that. It was supposed to be a real long-term plan, and I would learn so much from my dad. That was our game plan, and I got thrust into it. I was 28 and a mother of a 3.5-year-old and a 8-month-old baby, and I all of a sudden became the owner of Golden Moor Limited and had to decide where we were going, what we were doing, how I was going to deal with this company, and I chose to keep going. And I'm now older than my parents were, and we have survived. There's lots of people along the way that didn't think I should be keeping it, that I should cash out or do something different. But I chose it. This was my parents' business. I thought it should keep going, be a family business, and now I'm blessed that both my kids work with me, which is pretty fabulous, but I definitely had challenges. Only reason why I did succeed is because my cousin Ann McKenna, she had been working with our company, and my father had decided a few weeks before he died that he was going to make her president and I would be vice president and start our little transition. We didn't think he was going to die, but we did, and Ann has just been a phenomenal president of our company since 1996, and we are 67 years young.
For me,
a big part of it was learning not to wait until I felt perfectly ready. I raised my hand for opportunities. I took on stretch roles. I said yes to experiences that would build my skills, even when my hands were shaking with nerves. That actually made a real difference. Do not count yourself out before someone else has ever had the chance to count you in. Put your hand up. Let people see your ambition. Let people know you are interested in growing. My career, it's been more of a jungle gym than a ladder, and that's actually been a strength. You need to stay curious, take chances, and keep asking yourself, what experience do you need next if you want to keep moving towards senior leadership? That's important. You have to understand the trajectory you are aiming for and be honest about the roles, exposure, and experience you need to take to get there. And if you're not sure, ask. Ask leaders above you what they see. Ask what gaps you need to close. Ask for the opportunity. Too often, people wait to be tapped on the shoulder, but leadership does not always work that way. Sometimes you have to be the one to say, I'm ready to grow and here's where I want to go. For me, that combination of strong performance, clear direction, and that willingness to step forward made the difference. It's not just about working hard. It's about being visible, being intentionally, and making it easier for others to see you in that next role too.
Now, I'll turn it over to Ellie.
Turn the mic on. So this question for me was actually really hard to answer because I had to try and envision myself as being a leader. It honestly was very, very hard to even think of an answer, and it did help me realize what I've been through and what we're continuing to go through for all the women here today and the next ones to come. The big part of it for me was realizing that it's not just a detail of your position, that you can be apprentice and still show some leadership. We can still brainstorm. We always have something to bring to the table. Another one is realizing that leadership is not just in the field, it's not just in your trade, and it's not just at work. It's what you do every day. In my past, I used to represent trade women with a Build Together, and a big part of it was going to schools, going to high school, second career options, all that kind of stuff. That was the fun stuff. Just talking about your trade, what you love, right? It's so easy to talk about our work and what we do. The hard part was when we went to Parliament and we had to talk with the delegates. It felt like they gave us room to speak, but nobody would actually listen to what we had to say because we were still just blue collars. So I kept on thinking, and I was talking with my parents, like, what can we do? Because we have this opportunity to talk with people and bring some change, bring something for our women, for us, for our trades. So I decided to enroll in law classes. So I did that evenings after work so that when we went back into the discussion, they couldn't just throwing being a blue collar in my face, and that I pretty much had no value in that sense. So that helped me a lot. And something that helped me realize how leader ready I am was last month. So in my union, since the 1800s, we have had a convention every 5 years. So it's called the United Association Convention, and the new rules, all the new stuff come up in every 5 years. And every local, they get to have one delegate per 100 members. So we're 1,800. So this year is the first year that a woman is nominated and voted in for my local, and we're in 2026. To me, that was huge.
So let's circle back to what Wendy said. Growth rarely happens in a safe and familiar place, and that is very, very true. What really helped me from being a strong performer to being seen as a future potential leader was learning how to build value in ambiguity. Let me back up a little bit. I didn't go through what one would consider a typical path. I used to work at a small indoor hardware company in the finance department. When a project coordination opportunity came up, I became curious and thought about it and decided to go for it. Why not? I'm glad I did, because this opened up a lot of possibilities for me that I had no idea existed. As I previously mentioned, there's so much learning through experience and informal knowledge. As I moved through my career and gained more experience, I went from an organization with very well-defined processes into an architecture firm where my role as a project coordinator didn't really exist. I'll be honest, that leap was intimidating. I was very nervous, and I asked everybody that would listen to me for advice. And across the board, people I trusted encouraged me to take the risk and lean into the uncertainty. What I've come to learn in this architecture world, the focus was, and predominantly still is, on developing architects and not necessarily on developing project management teams like myself. That's where my career has been focused on. That meant I had to work harder to clearly articulate why my role mattered, how it supported project outcomes, and how it added value both to leadership and project teams. Over time, instead of just doing the work well, I focused on shaping the work, creating structure, improving coordination, and solving problems before they became an issue. Of course, there was challenges, as folks had no idea what I did or why it was important. Fast forward 4.5 years later, and what started as one role has now grown into a robust project delivery team with individuals dedicated to project management, such as project admins, a lot more project coordinators, and dedicated project managers, and they're not all architects. This has created an opportunity for folks like myself to help leadership teams shape and help develop careers that paths that were not previously available. For me, leadership wasn't about having the title. It was about identifying a gap, owning it, and helping the organization evolve because of it.
So the most common comment that I've gotten since becoming a project manager is that when people come to me with problems, they know they'll get solutions and they'll get them fast. I'll never forget the first time a trade called me and said, I didn't realize that if I needed something done, I could just give you a call and it would be dealt with quickly. I remember thinking, well, yeah, obviously, isn't that kind of the point? But then I realized that this could be something that sets me apart. My job can be very chaotic. Even the best run projects have their bumps in the road. And with the challenges and problems that we face every day, being successful in this role looks like being someone who faces those challenges head on, as all three women mentioned in their video. And most importantly, being someone that people feel confident in coming to when shit hits the fan, because it always does. I grew up playing competitive basketball, and my childhood pretty much revolved around competitive sports, so the way that I approach projects is very heavily influenced by that team culture. So not to be incredibly cheesy, but teamwork really does make the dream work. And one of my core values is that being a strong leader means creating a strong team environment. Every team is going to face challenges, and the leader that's going to drive them to success is the one that faces those challenges head on and is willing to learn and is open to new experiences. A strong focus on teamwork is why I put so much emphasis on developing strong relationships with the people I work with. I really do believe that relationship building is an overlooked soft skill that can make any project manager better and make any project run smoother. I love that I get to spend my day solving problems and working with people. I love that I have the power to create an environment where we operate like teammates who are all striving towards the same goal. We might not feel like it every day on a construction site, but we really are all working towards the same end goal. And I love that I can be someone that people know they can come to for solutions. You don't have to be a boss to be a leader. In fact, there's the whole psychology behind the fact that boss and a leader actually really aren't the same thing. But the point being, whether you're freshly graduated or 20 years in, you can be a leader. You have to face challenges head on, be willing to learn, be open to new experiences, and be a team player. And if I could leave you with one piece of advice that my father gave me all throughout growing up, it's to not be afraid of the unknown, because life and growth begins outside of your comfort zone.
So, as the industry continues to evolve, more women are building long and successful careers in construction. At the same time, leadership pathways can still present challenges. For this question, we asked our panelists to share their perspective on barriers that may still exist for women in the industry, from moving into senior and executive leadership, and what individuals, organizations, and the industry as a whole can do to help address them.
Construction does remain a traditionally male-dominated environment, and this legacy still shapes culture, expectations, and access to opportunities. Subtle biases or offhand comments can undermine confidence and belonging. While policies may appear to be neutral, when you really dig into them, there are barriers in practice, especially around caregiving or the expectation that people are always on in construction roles. Equal access to opportunity. There needs to be open pathways to senior roles by standardizing the criteria against which they're reviewed for advancement. You can't assume that somebody might be interested or not interested. You have to give that opportunity to everyone to let them as individuals, whether they're men or women, rise to the occasion. You need to be transparent with the next generation. You need to be open with your younger women in your organization about the realities of the industry and about the strategies that you found that work. Provide guidance on those obstacles while reinforcing the confidence and the capability and their value. For organizations, they really need to build inclusive pipelines to leadership, and that's across the board. Audit policies for those hidden biases. Track progress annually so that you're an individual being reviewed, you're not a man or a woman being interviewed. And celebrate the success stories. For individuals, I think you need to support other women, introduce, recommend, and elevate them. You need to speak up when something is wrong. You need to stay curious and stay informed. And you need to do good in the world and bring values-driven leadership into every project. Women don't need to change to succeed in construction. The industry needs to evolve to recognize the talent already is there. If you're good at what you do, your gender doesn't make any difference. Leadership is leadership, excellence is excellence, and the future of construction requires all of us working together.
One of the barriers I think that exists for women moving into senior and executive leadership roles is simply representation. There are not many women in these positions in the construction industry here currently. And so with that, naturally, there's just a lower level of support, a lower level of sponsorship, and there needs to be a more intentional thought put into bringing young, up-and-coming, promising women into these rooms and pulling their careers along to help sponsor them and mentor them into these roles. Another piece here that feeds along with this is receiving true feedback. I know in my career, it's been very few and far between managers who've given me true, hard, honest feedback that allowed me to see a bigger picture, that allowed me to grow. But those conversations are the ones that are truly more meaningful and do help women move beyond and onto the next levels of their career.
I think one of the biggest barriers is still attitude, perception, and the assumptions that sit underneath both. There's still deeply rooted beliefs about who looks like a leader in construction, who's going to get trusted with senior responsibility, and who gets included in the relationships and experiences that lead to advancement. That's what continues to slow real progress. And those patterns, they're not just held by the old guard. They get passed down to the next generation. If the same four guys always attend the tournament, get invited into the room, or build their relationship around key opportunities, then where is the chance to change the pattern? If access to leadership still follows that same social habit, we should not be surprised when leadership continues to look the same. That is why this is so much bigger than representation alone. It is about interrupting the habits, language, and informal systems that keep reinforcing that same outcome. Women are still too often the only one at the table, still having to prove ourselves repeatedly and still being measured differently. I can tell you that takes a toll, and it's also sending a message to the younger women behind us about what's possible. We need to address this earlier and more intentionally. That means creating visible leadership paths for young and mid-career women, promoting women faster in meaningful decision-making roles, and being honest where culture is still excluding people, even unintentionally, because you cannot be what you cannot see, and companies cannot keep saying they want change while repeating the same patterns that prevent it. The reality is, our industry does not have time to move this slowly. With the labor shortages ahead, we need every talented leader we can get. This is not just a women's issue. It's a business issue, a culture issue, and a leadership issue. If we want different outcomes, we have to be willing to challenge the beliefs and assumptions that have been getting in the way for far too long.
I'd like to invite Emily to start this one.
Okay, so I think most of us can recognize the boys club culture that exists in construction, where women struggle to just be included in the social situations where relationships develop. The problem there being that we as humans just can't resist the effects that social interactions have on our opinions and biases. And we would be naive to assume that those relationships don't impact promotions and business advancements. As Jen mentioned in her video, our society still has deeply rooted beliefs about what a leader looks like and who gets to be included in or excluded from the social interactions that lead to advancement. This exclusion can be intentional, something as simple as the belief that women would ruin the fun. I'm sure we've all heard that one before. And it can be unintentional, something like choosing a social activity that just targets men in the first place. Hockey, as an example, the PEO tournament in Sudbury more specifically, I've seen a lot of team photos from that tournament, and I think I've seen one that had a female hockey player on it. That tournament obviously doesn't explicitly exclude women, but it's a weekend away for a sport that heavily targets men in the first place, and is a great opportunity for networking, bonding, and growing relationships. Golf, as another example, think back to the last industry golf tournament you went to. Did every foursome have a female golfer? Did half of them have a female golfer? Funny thing about golf is that in this industry, playing golf actually taught me a very valuable lesson about the barriers that still exist for women in social settings, and how we could all use a little bit more audacity. Goes back about 10 years. I just finished my first summer as an intern for an engineering design firm, and they invited me to play in their company golf tournament. I made an excuse about why I couldn't go because I knew I was really bad at golf and I didn't want to embarrass myself. I remember thinking that people probably wouldn't want a girl on their team in the first place because girls don't golf, and I would just solidify that by sucking. The next summer, I went and got a golf membership with the ulterior motive of actually being a decent golfer so that I could go to these events, do the networking, do the socializing, not miss out, and not embarrass myself. In an interesting turn of events, I took that task so seriously that a couple years later, at an industry golf weekend, my first day score placed me 5th or 6th out of over 20 golfers. I realized pretty quickly that none of the men felt the need to be a great golfer to participate, they just did it. I spent years worrying about how embarrassing it would be if I couldn't drive the ball 200 yards down the center of the fairway each time, and half of these men were shanking it 100 yards to the left 6 times out of 10, and they didn't give a shit. There was already an external barrier in place for women in these social settings, of golf being a boys' sport. And I went ahead and gave myself an internal one, that I had to meet this self-inflicted performance requirement to even participate. This is unfortunately a pattern that we see so much in society, where men just have more audacity than we do. They just do it, and women feel the need to be perfect before they even give it a try. So, to circle back to Jen's point about leadership continuing to follow the same social pattern, all the men here today and in our industry have the power to break that pattern. They can be a part of the solution and break the pattern that naturally excludes women from participating. They can notice the locker room talk, the boys club energy, and they can fight against it to make sure that their female teammates feel included. And on the topic of being audacious, for all of the women here today, I want you to be curious about what's going on in your own mind. Ask yourself if you are creating internal barriers for yourself and what it would look like if you removed them.
We just had a little moment, and I think her is very powerful, and I want to finish with hers. No pressure. She's like, so, you might think that my background from being in the field since 2011, that I'm gonna have a lot to say. Honestly, I didn't get that many barriers. To me, being a woman was a strength. We all get challenges in the field, and if anybody here has been an apprentice or worked in the field, everybody goes through it. When you're an apprentice, you have to learn to find your voice, to earn your place, to prove yourself. So I had to do that too. Everyone goes through it. I was very focused on myself and being better than who I was yesterday. My grandfather always had a saying, and that my father kept on saying to me, which I thought was very annoying, was that a ticket weighs nothing, but it opens so many doors. So every training that was offered, I took it. Whether they asked me to take it or not, I just did. So I ended up with genie lifts, scissor lifts, working at heights, confined space attendant, overhead crane, even orbital welding. And for that one, it was amazing because I'm working on a job site with 50 people, 50 plumbers, or maybe 200 workers on the site, and I'm a 5th-year apprentice. You're not technically supposed to have your orbital welding ticket as an apprentice, and not even as a welder, but hey, I got it. So in this project, I ended up being the lead because I was one of 2 people with the ticket for the whole company. Even if they weren't on site, nobody else had it. So I ended up having 4 journeymen under me following my lead. So that was very amazing for me. And it shaped how I saw myself in the industry, that I did have value, and these men that worked with me and for me on this were amazing. They never once doubted me, which helped me not doubt myself. The real barriers for me was actually when I moved into the office. That's when I really felt the glass ceiling effect. Something that I heard often, and it affected me, was that they didn't like hiring women like me because we go and get pregnant, and then we leave for a year. Who has ever heard that or even thought of it, right? Right? Surprised that not a men raised their hand. It's normal, right? Something else that stayed with me is I learned that a lot of people got to work from home. I live far, that's my choice. I worked for a company in Ottawa, and I live in Quebec, and I drive a big truck. And I asked, hey, can I work from home too? Everybody else is doing it. The answer to me was, if you think gas is expensive, wait till you have to buy diapers. I was like, okay, let me get the chance to work from home. And barriers like that, they affect the progress that we'll have today. Even at one point, I was, we'll say senior estimator, there's no actual titles, but I was the one with the most experience. So my manager at the time had to leave, he was gone for 6 to 8 months, and I had to step in for him. So I was still doing my job as an estimator. I stepped in for his role. I was looking for work, giving work to my coworkers, trying not to give them too much, right, so they're not overworked, so I was overworked. And then when it came to the compensation and I talked with my manager, turns out I was making less than every single person, even the people that I was training, and I had the most experience. So that's where some of the barriers still are today. So we need progression in leadership, not to just get women in, but to retain them and to support them. We need to address all these things. We need accountability. We need leadership that is willing to challenge those biases. The talent is there, the experience is there. We need to make sure that the opportunities are there too.
All right. I have to agree with what has been said already. There is a lack of representation, and the gap is even more pronounced for visible minority women like myself. I'll be honest, whenever I walk into a new room or I start a new role, I find myself scanning the room to see if anyone looks like me. Another woman, another person of color, or both. When you don't see representation, it creates an unspoken question. Do I belong at the table? Unconsciously, it also creates a moment of hesitation, where I wonder if I will be understood if I show up as I am, or do I have to filter myself and be more relatable? I'm sure a lot of women here have experienced that. And let's be honest, this isn't something that most men have to really think about. Not just in this industry, but in most industry and most rooms. Even preparing today, I tried to be mindful to find the words that could actually resonate without minimizing how real that feels. I may have a little bit of a different perspective than my other colleagues on stage. I'm a first-generation immigrant, and I had to learn the ins and outs of this industry without a playbook or a built-in network. I'm still learning and I'm still building. But I also know that I'm not unique, and more people from different backgrounds are joining the industry. I mean, just look around here today. we have to learn to navigate, they also have to learn to navigate the same, do I fit in here feeling. I'll also acknowledge that I do have a little bit of privilege, as I did grow up in a household full of men. I actually quite often joke that I was raised by men. So being in a male-dominated industry and leaning on male mentors wasn't that intimidating. What has increasingly excited me and motivated me, though, is seeing so much more women in leadership at every level. Because representation changes how welcoming it feels to speak up in rooms where I know my expertise can add value. When you see yourself reflected in leadership, contributing isn't just easier, it's more impactful to the organization. Early on in my career, I remember I was shadowing another female coordinator on site, and she was explaining to the GC exactly what was needed to do a successful ADO installation. She was confident, she was technical, and she was clear. He interrupted her with questions like, how do you know all this? What's your background? You're so young. I felt like he was questioning her authority, but she didn't even flinch. She answered what mattered, ignored what didn't, redirected back to scope, and then asked for confirmation, like, you got that, right? I remember thinking, wow, that was pretty badass. But moments like that, where women are leading, shouldn't feel exceptional. They should be normal. So, how can leaders address this? Well, first, representation has to be intentional, not incidental. That means promoting women and visible minority women into visible roles, decision-making roles, and executive pathways. Second, it means shifting from mentorship alone to sponsorship. So that means actively advocating for women when they're not in the room. And third, it means creating cultures where expertise is trusted, authority isn't questioned by default, and people don't have to constantly prove they belong before they're heard. When leaders get this right, women don't just stay in the industry. We rise and we help transform it.
So this leads us to our final question. So we're going to close with a question that invites a bit of reflection. When we look back on our careers, there are often lessons that only become clear with experience and time. For this final question, we asked our panelists to think about what do they know now that they wish they had understood earlier in their career, and what advice they might share with those coming up behind them.
Trust yourself, be confident. You might be the expert in a situation. You need to be able to present information in a format that lets sometimes people actually think that they came up with the solution that you've just presented. Challenge team members constructively, whether that be engineers, contractors, consultants, while maintaining respect and professionalism, creating an environment where the best ideas rise. Regardless of the role of that person, it could be the most junior person in the conversation that has the best idea. Listen. And the power of questions. How accumulated knowledge gives you the insight to ask those right questions along the way. When I first started out, it was a pretty rough business in terms of there was a lot of heated arguments. You know, we're all dealing with tight budget, compressed schedules, skilled trade shortages, supply chain instability, global uncertainties, and unrealistic client expectations. And so around 10 years ago, it seemed like we started working better together. And when I say that, that's the entire industry, men and women together. And this last little while, as those other pressures seem to take over, it's getting nasty out there again. And the only way any of us are going to succeed is if we all succeed working together. We need to build a more supportive construction culture across the board. We must collectively do better, that being the owners, the contractors, the consultants, the trades, everybody. We have to restore collaboration. It's not an option, it's essential. And we need to empower the next generation, whether that be including men and women, to step forward with confidence, curiosity, and conviction.
One of the things I wish I had understood earlier in my career was the importance of advocating for myself. I don't think I always appreciated how much people maybe made assumptions on what might be best for me, what I might like, and didn't always ask. I found many years later, after learning to advocate, having some of those conversations, that people had made completely wrong assumptions, which had probably delayed growth in some areas over time. So always making sure that people are aware of what you want, what you need for growth, and looking for those opportunities. They're not always going to come exactly when you want them, but if people don't know that you're open to them, that you want to be considered for opportunities, then your name's never going to be put on that list. I found when I came back from my first maternity leave, people assumed that I wanted an easy job, I wanted a bit of a break. I had just become a mom. It took a while before I started talking to folks that, in fact, it was the opposite. I wanted more challenge, I wanted to get in, I wanted to make up for lost time. And just in delaying advocating for myself, I also delayed jumping forward. Once I took that step to talk to those people, to make it known what I wanted next for my career, then it opened the doors for movement. But again, wish I had learned a little bit of that earlier and probably would have started advocating sooner.
What I know now and wish I had understood earlier is that I was thinking too narrowly about where I belong. I wish I'd entered the commercial construction industry so much earlier. For a long time, I did not fully see the opportunity in front of me, and I didn't understand how to connect my education, my experience, my strengths, to see that whole scale of impact in the industry. I was looking for fit when I could have been thinking a lot more boldly about contribution. That shift happened when I had support that helped me step back and look at the big picture. I started to see that my career did not need to follow a traditional path to be valuable, and that some of the perspective I gained outside of that expected route was actually the part that made me more effective. I also understand now that comparison can be a distraction. Early in your career, it is so easy to measure yourself against other people's background or experience and assume that that's the standard, that's the metric that everybody is being measured about. But that is often the wrong metric. The better question is, what do you uniquely bring that strengthens the conversation, the team, and the company? We do not add the same value in the same way, and that's the point. Different backgrounds create different instincts, different questions, and different ways of seeing opportunities. It's not a weakness to work around, it's a strength to build from. What I wish I'd understood earlier is that you do not need to spend years trying to match someone else's path before you give yourself permission to think bigger. Your value may not look exactly like the person beside you, but that doesn't mean it's smaller. In many cases, it is what value you bring to the table that makes your contribution matter more.
Now, I'll turn that back over to Emily.
Okay, so very early on in my career, I thought I had to pick somewhere and something and stick with it. That was going to be my place, and that would be my career. I would hear stories about people who spent their entire career in one place, and I thought that I had to do the same thing in order to be seen as a loyal member of the team. As Jen mentioned in her video, comparison is a distraction, and that could not have been more true. I wasted so much time and energy thinking about what other people were doing and what paths worked for them instead of focusing on what path was going to work best for me. This city is small, despite having 1 million people, and this industry is smaller, and people love to talk. I was terrified that if I changed jobs or careers that people would talk and that it would negatively affect my reputation. What I learned after making a couple changes, including a career path change, was that as long as I was being respectful and intentional and doing what was best for me and my career, that it wasn't going to reflect badly on me. I actually do, in a way, believe that changing my mind helped my career path. I was a mechanical engineer in consulting for nearly 7 years before switching over to being an M&E project manager with a GC. And all those years that I spent diving into the technical side of the industry and really learning about mechanical building systems was a real asset when I jumped into this role. And sometimes I even questioned if I could be as efficient of a project manager as I am now if I didn't have that background. At the end of the day, would it have been nice to have settled into my career and found my place a little bit sooner? Obviously, nobody likes change, and changing jobs, let alone careers, can be very scary and daunting. But at the end of the day, I actually wouldn't have changed that path for anything. So if I could go back and tell my 21-year-old freshly graduated self anything, it's to not put so much energy into making the perfect decision right away. Because what feels like a perfect decision in that moment might not feel like that 5 years later. So it is okay to change my mind, and everything was gonna work out in the end.
So this one's gonna be short and sweet for me. The answer for this came so easily because I always keep on telling myself, what could I have done different? Or what could I have told 18-year-old Kelly? First day, first boots on the ground, on the job site, first union class, when I was the only girl. I'll be honest, I never actually noticed I was the only girl. I was just so focused on doing my job. I never noticed that by just showing up, that was already part of the change. That even when we don't realize it, we represent women. Whether we want to or not, every girl that's gonna come after us, their judgment of others is based on us of what they've seen. So it matters that we do show up. And it's that the women of today are shaping the future for the women of tomorrow, and what women believe that is possible, even when we don't see it.
So one thing I wish I understood early on in my career is just how important it is to be audacious, not just at work, but in every aspect of your life. Speak up sooner, advocate for yourself more clearly, and show up confidently in the value you bring. Early on, it's easy to think that your title defines your impact. But I've learned, and I'm still learning, that influence, growth, and leadership aren't limited to a job title. They're shaped by how you show up. I also wish I had understood how critical mentorship really was, instead of just asking everybody. Having people just trust, who you can learn from, ask questions, and gain perspective from can fundamentally change how you navigate challenges and how willing you are to take risks. Mentorship isn't about having all the answers. It's about having access to perspective while you're still figuring things out. The industry can feel overwhelming, especially when you don't come from a traditional technical or trade background like myself. I didn't always have a clear reference point of what success could look like. My strengths weren't tied to one technical path. They came from coordination, communication, and problem solving across teams. Understanding that those skills are just as critical to project success was a turning point for me. What I now know is that this industry needs many different paths and skills to be successful. There's so much talent entering the industry, and it benefits all of us to be as intentional about creating environments that not only attract talent, but retain it as well, regardless of what someone looks like or what path brought them here. That's why visibility also really matters. When people finally see themselves here, they stop questioning whether they belong and start building a future. And for women, especially visible minorities, seeing the representation earlier on can be the difference between questioning whether you belong and confidently knowing that you do. If I could go back, I'd tell my younger self, be bolder sooner, ask the questions, take up space, and trust that your value doesn't need to look like anyone else's to have an impact.
Before we get to questions, I just also want to take the time to thank the contributors that provided the video content for us, who was Melissa Houle from PCL, Laura Grover from JL Richards. We also have with us Debbie Moore from Goldie Moore, who's sitting with us. Wendy Brawley from Hoban Architects is also with us. Jennifer Cross is with us. I feel like I'm forgetting one more member. Am I? I'll go with no. Okay, and I'd like to open it up to questions. Does anybody have any? There's always got to be one. I'm going to tell you what I always do. I will walk out there and hand a mic to somebody, so somebody needs to stand up.
I think these girls have done an excellent job. Yeah. work with Haiti, and the example she used, I had a revelation while she spoke, is that when she joined us 5 years ago, I didn't understand what she did. And I didn't understand what she could bring to the project. And after 2 years, we were like, maybe we need to create more Hades. And that came from her persistence and audacity, because she was new to the company, but she wasn't afraid to speak her mind to the people who listened. And we benefited a lot from that. So yeah, I think that there's a good lesson in that.
Oh, nice.
Maybe used to work for me.
I got that. Hi.
Thank you so much. Those were great presentations. I did want to dig in a little bit to the glass ceiling. Maybe if you have any tips or advice and your perspective on maybe sharing salaries among women or among other people in the industry, kind of what your perspectives are on that and how that can really empower us in the industry.
I can answer that one. I don't have a solution. But what I can say for me, what was really impactful is coming from the union. We all have this, like I'm not gonna say value, but we're paid through a year. First year get this amount, second year get this amount, third, fourth, fifth, journeyman. It's never about gender. So when I was in the office, like that's what traumatized me so much. And there was an incident when we found out one of my coworkers was making a lot less than everyone else, even less than me. And like I was making less in my scenario. And when me and her were having a conversation, we're friends, we're talking. I'm never told I'm not allowed to talk about my salary. I didn't sign anything. We were having a conversation, so no real numbers were exchanged, but I think she saw it in my face, something was wrong. And I just dared her to go and talk. I was like, you have to, because nobody else will for you. And they kind of tried to fire me over it, and I just told them, prove that I'm the one that said something. Pretty much. At least she got her increase that way, but I find it so scary that they want to pay us less without saying they're going to pay us less, but then we're not allowed to talk about it. I feel if we're paid fair, why can't we talk about our salary? Why are they ashamed of what they're paying us, what we're giving? What is it our fault if something comes out when they're the ones paying us less? Because if we're paid equally, why can't we talk about it?
I was just going to echo exactly what Kelly just said, that if everyone is being paid equally and fairly, then there's not going to be a problem with people talking about it. I do think that there's a way to be respectful and intentional and potentially even a little discreet about it, but if we're all being paid equally and fairly, then who cares if we're talking about it? I think our generation is a lot more open about salaries in general and just finances. I think our parents' generation was a lot more closed off about those topics, and we've kind of flipped the script a little bit. And amongst my friends, like nobody cares. Everybody shares that information. It doesn't matter to us. And I think that openness is just going to help us at the end of the day, because it helps us recognize where there are shortcomings, maybe in a company's pay structure, and where we can push for change.
Honestly, that's a very valid point, and I look amongst the audience today, and I know there's a lot of leaders in here. So you can take this message back to higher ups and make the change. Because really, if there is no pay differences, then there's nothing to talk about. We talk about other more important things, and we focus on the actual work. Then, how much are you getting paid? Oh, that just becomes a non-issue. So, let's go, leaders.
All right, well, hello.
Sorry. As somebody who comes from a financial background, who stepped into a project coordination role about 4 years ago, one thing that I struggled with is mostly, some of that technical knowledge and trying to find or figure out where to get that knowledge. Or, also being scared to ask the questions on site and, being looked down on for not knowing those things. And I guess I was just wondering if you had any advice on, certain courses or where to go looking, or how to kind of get over that fear of asking those questions, even if they might seem silly to others.
So my favorite way to learn is to ask the people on site. And what I've learned is that if you are trying to help them, they're not going to think you're stupid for asking a question. I love going and straight to the foreman and asking what their opinion is about how to install it, about what's going on, about what the problem is, because oftentimes they're the ones that actually have the answers. I have a mechanical background and I stepped into an M&E project manager role, so I knew not that much about electrical going in. My favorite people to talk to are the electricians. The electricians know a lot more than a lot of people give them credit for. They're the ones who actually make it work on site. And every single electrician I have encountered has been more than happy to answer what to me sometimes do feel like stupid questions, because they know that I'm going to be able to help them better if they just help me understand. So just ask the questions. And if someone makes you feel stupid, then that's ridiculous, because you're just trying to learn and trying to help them. And my experience is that the majority of people actually do want to help you to help them.
Can I ask what field you're in, that it's in?
It's a project coordinator for GC.
So like everything like civil, mechanical,
Yeah.
electrical, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Who here knows tradespeople, like boots on ground? How much do they love their trade and to talk about it? Oh, so, and I'm not any better. Ask any of my students. If you're not already a plumber, I'm gonna try to turn you. I'm being honest. So ask those people. If there's any way that I can help, reach out to me. I can help for plumbing, mechanical, some electrical, and if I don't know the answer, I'll try to find somebody. But I think if in this room, if we all work together, we can help one another. And I think all of us, we all might be scared to actually ask something, because nobody likes to look stupid. And especially sometimes we already feel like we don't belong, and we're scared that if we ask the question, we're proving we don't belong, right? Did the first guy on site, first year, did he know what he's doing? No. He's learning. We're all learning. Everybody is learning in here. So I think we can all help one another, and if somebody has, maybe not an answer, maybe just an opinion, maybe, hey, we can go ask this person, just that's gonna help us learn more. I think we're all here to learn. That's all I got.
Well, we've run over our allotted time, and I want to thank you for being so patient with us, and thank you for coming out today, and we hope to see all of you again next year. And please don't hesitate to ask more questions in this issue.
Sorry, just some closing remarks here. I can't find the speaker gifts, so if anyone sees those around the room, let me know. Thank you, ladies. What a powerful and insightful discussion. I know I'm certainly leaving today feeling inspired. I'd also like to thank Tracy. You were an amazing moderator. Tracy organized this whole discussion and brought all these lovely ladies together. So a big round of applause for Tracy. So on behalf of the OCA and our speaker gift sponsors, Soloway Wright LLP and Beacon Light, please accept, once I find these gifts, please accept this as a small token of our appreciation. You guys did an amazing job. Thank you.
And wish I had understood earlier is that I was thinking too narrowly about where I work. I wish I'd understood.
Take any of this stuff and just put it. I'm gonna go throw it in my car. I'm gonna go right now. I think the first one is